Okay, so today we're doing Studio 4. Here's a demo of what we're going for. The only difference from last time is that we are able to search by topic rather than by title, which means if I type vampire here, we get vampire-related movies that don't necessarily have to have that word in the title. So we start off talking about the API and kind of how this actually works. Would it be helpful for me to go over this stuff, or should I skip straight to the code? Any thoughts? Skip to the code? All right, I'm going to skip to the code. We can come back if stuff comes up here. So step number 1, we are asked to add another argument to this discover movies function so that we can include it in our request, include the keyword in our request. So what that means here is, so this function, we now want to, it's bugging me, I don't have a cursor. It won't show me where my cursor is. Oh, there it is. Okay. So we now want to pass this thing another argument, right? This with keywords thing. So that was one of the things from the API. And to do that, we simply add another key value pair to this data object. So we're already passing one header in the HTTP request, which is the same thing we've always been doing, which is we're telling it our developer key to authenticate ourselves. But here we want to attach another header or parameter. And the key word for this is with keywords. So this tells the API, I want to browse for movies, but I only want movies that are relevant to these keywords. Oh, you know what? I'm on step 2, sorry. So we'll come back to that in a sec. Step 1 was just, what is up with this? There we go. Step 1 was just to add another argument to this function, right? So keywords. So now we accept another argument which we can use, and I got ahead of myself, but we're going to use it down here, right? And actually, really quick, why? So in this function, I have the callback as the second argument. So why am I asking you, is there any reason, does the order matter? And if so, why is it different this time? So the reason I had it as the second, it should be the second one here, oops, up here. What? That's so annoying. So anyway, up here it should be the second argument. The reason why is, remember that down here, we haven't looked at this in a couple studios, but every time our document loads, our HTML finishes loading, we're calling discover movies, right? And that's what causes the stuff to show up in the first place. Like when the user first visits the page, it's not empty because we're making this original call. And the first time we make this call, we don't have any particular keywords we want to search for. We just want to get those default popular movies. So the way we can do this is, you know, I could pass another argument here, like empty string or something. And I would type that if I could, but my computers won't let me move my cursor around. So strange. So like, there, okay. So I could do something like this, meaning discover movies with keywords nothing or something. But the nice thing is I can just leave that undefined. So JavaScript gives us this flexibility where a function can specify that it accepts multiple arguments like this, but we don't actually have to provide them all. And so if I call it as I do down there with only one argument, the render function, then this second one, there we go, keywords. So I'm expecting 2 arguments, but I was only given 1. So this, now when it comes time to execute the body of this function, this thing is just going to be undefined, which is special. It's kind of like null in C, right? And that's okay. It's not going to crash, even though we gave it the wrong number of arguments. And so if I had switched the order, then there would be no way of, then I would really have to put something here, because render should come second, because it's the callback and the callback. So the order matters, right? The callback comes second. So we always need a callback, but we only sometimes need here we are. We always need a callback. We only sometimes need the keywords. So I put callback first, because there's no way you could skip the one and then add the second. So anyway, so we're taking a second argument, and we're going to use it down here. By adding it to this data object. And the magic phrase here was with keywords. So unlike with if you're just making a variable, you can just give it whatever name seems reasonable to you. But with something like this, the API itself is expecting an exact certain key name for all these things. So we have to go based on what they're expecting. And what it is with keywords. So you saw that in the documentation earlier. That was one of those available parameters that you can attach to this, a request coming into this discover movies endpoint. And what it allows us to do is it allows us to say, I want to only discover movies that are applicable or related to the keywords that I'm giving you here. And so we're just going to pass the thing that we were given here. Does that make sense? Cool. So I just did steps 1 and 2. And let's do this verification step. And it looks like I broke something actually. So let's find out what I broke. It says uncaught syntax error, expected token illegal, line 11. What did I do? Didn't finish the quotation mark. Nice. Thank you. And I also need a comma, right? Because we still have this thing down here. Gotcha. Gotcha. Add this stuff on line 12. Cool. Thanks. All right. Let's try again. So what we're going to do is use this cool feature of the developer tools whereby you can type some stuff and it'll evaluate it and show you what happens. You can even affect your page, and that's what we're going to do here. I'm going to call this discover movies function to make sure it works. I'm going to pass in render as a callback, and I'm going to pass in a string that we are given here. Oops. paste, paste. There we go. So if all goes well, we should see some vampire stuff. Great, yeah. Does that make sense? Is this thing awesome? Yes. You should use this all the time. It's really great. Step number 3. So the rest of our work pretty much is in the search function. The first step is just to change the URL of where we're going to. So previously we were searching for a particular movie, and when it came back we were going to render it and all that stuff now. So now what we want to do is we're not looking for movies anymore. We're just looking for keywords, where keywords are like those magic numbers that we're going to feed to Discover. So now there's kind of 2 requests that have to happen for someone to search for a particular movie. First, we're going to make a request in here, and that's what this search function is going to do. It's going to get back those keywords. Then we're going to use those magic numbers. Then we're going to use those magic numbers to build this string, and then we're going to pass all that over into Discover and let Discover do its thing. So step 3 just asked us to change where we're going. So instead of going to this endpoint, we want to go to this endpoint, search/keyword. Yeah, what's up? Oh, yeah. So we're done with 3. That was all we had to do there. Done. Now the rest of these steps, step 4, are all when the response comes back, which is hint hint. That's me not quite wanting to just tell you that it's in here, but it's in here, right? So this, when the response comes back, we're going to execute this callback function that we gave as the value to this success key. So the success function handles it coming back, unless something goes wrong, in which case this won't get called. And we'll talk about that hopefully on Thursday. But so for now, okay, when the response comes back, we want to do all this stuff. We want to, basically, we want to, like I said before, figure out what the string should be, make this string, and then call Discover and pass it string. So step 4a, create a new variable. Is this big enough? Big enough, right? Okay. Create a new variable called keyword IDs, whose value is an array of all the .id values of each of the objects, blah, blah, blah. So instead of, first thing let's do is just what we currently have in the success callback is a log statement where we print the response. So let's just go over to browser window and look at what this looks like, so we're all on the same page about that. Search vampire. So this object is the result of that console.log statement. And as before, we've got results, and actually, yeah, okay, great. So we get a response, which is an object, and the data we care about is inside this results array, and each of the items inside that array is also an object. Instead of being a movie object, this is a keyword object. It's a much smaller thing. There's only 2 properties on it, name and ID, and this is the magic number we care about. And let's just like look at some of these. Southern vampire. I don't quite know what that's about, but so like what the API vampire slayer. So what it lets you do is search for a thing like vampire. It'll give you back all kinds of vampire-related tags that might be on a movie, and then you can search for movies with those tags. So we don't want to do anything fancy. Like we could say, I don't care about Vampire Weekend. I only care about Vampire or something. We're just going to take them all. We'll take any movie that has any of these things. So what we want to do is we've got 20 of these ID numbers here, and we want to build a big string that includes all of them, separated by those pipe characters. And I'll talk about that more in a second. So the first thing we want to do is just get these ID numbers in a big array. Right? Is that the thing? Yeah. Var keyword IDs equals, and I ask you to use this fancy new cool function, map. So we're going to map over those results. So response.results.map. So what map does is it allows you to take an array, some kind of array like this, and produce a new array where each of the items in that array has been somehow transformed into a different item. So you're mapping each element into a related element. And the way you do that is you give it a function which it's going to call on each of those elements. So it's going to give me a thing. I'll just say a thing. And each time I get a thing, I'm going to return a new thing. And now, when I'm done with all this, this keyword IDs is going to be an array full of new things. One for each of the, maybe I'll call this old thing, right? So in general, that's what is happening with map. And so in our case, let's give these more appropriate names. So what's the old thing? The old thing is whatever was in here, response.results. So it's like these objects. So it's like a little object representing a keyword. So I'm just going to call this keyword obj. So that's what I was given from the old array, and what I want to return is something new. And in fact, what I want is pretty simple. It's just I don't want an object with both of these things. I just want this. I just care about the number, right? So it's as simple as saying keyword obj dot ID, because this object has two properties, dot ID and dot name. And I'm going to do a log statement now, and we can see if this works. But what we're hoping happens is that this is an array of integers. Search for a vampire. I'm going to clear this thing. Great. So it worked. Does that make sense? Any questions about map? Okay. So for A is done. For B asks us to. Okay, so now we have an array of numbers, but ultimately what we want is a string. So we're asked to use this join function to convert the one to the other. So all we have to do is say, make a new variable, keywords keywords string equals keyword IDs dot join. And in fact, for step B, this is all we have to do. So this magic join function takes an array of things and gives you a string where all the things are in the string and they're separated by commas. Let's print this and see if it looks like that. Keywords string. Yep. So it's not exactly clear from the way they printed it out here that this is actually a string, because it's not like in quotes. It's not. There's no syntax highlighting the way it would be here, where the stuff turned green. But I think we can. Actually, there kind of is syntax highlighting, right? Because these numbers were blue, so I guess black is just how chrome color strings. A little confusing to me, but they're comma separated, so that worked. Questions about join? Okay, so the next thing we are asked to do is, instead of commas, we want these things. So before we actually implement that, I'll talk a little bit about why we want one versus the other and what it's all about. So this was the API specified that when you're giving it these keywords, it wants you to. You have two choices. You can separate them with commas, or you can separate them with pipe characters. And what you're signifying based on your choice is whether you want to do an AND query or an OR query. So with commas, we're asking for an AND query, which means we're telling the API, give me back any movies that are tagged with all of these tags. And you'll find that if we try to do that, we're going to get no movies back. So instead, we're going with this OR syntax, which says, give me back any movies that have like at least one of these tags. So we need to change our string so that we can make that OR query instead of an AND query. And the way we do that, so join by default is going to give you a comma separated string, but if you don't want to use commas, you can use whatever you want. So if I did this, then it would say 3133 baseball 18, right? You can put whatever you want in here. Often you'll want a comma and a space because it looks a little nicer. In this case, we want just a pipe character. Great, we got the pipes. Mark both of these is done. All right, last thing to do. So we've got this string, and we've got this function that we wrote a little while ago, discover movies, or that we edited a little while ago, which is now just sitting there waiting for us to give it that string so we can call the discover movies endpoint and do the callback that we gave it. So let's go ahead and do that. All we have to do is call the function. And so we give it two arguments, right? This first one, first I'm going to do the second one. The second one is just the string we just made right here. And then it also wants the callback, which is, we know that it's rendered here, but theoretically could be anything. But we're just going to use whatever is passed into search movies. So the caller of search movies is like now 2 steps removed from when this callback for example, render or whatever it is actually gets executed, but that's fine. So discover movies is just going to pass it along and say, someone gave me this callback function. I don't know what it is, but hey, discover movies, go do your thing, and then you do this callback function. So if we try this now, we should actually, we should now see the vampire movie show up. Let's see. Great. Any questions there? Cool. And then the last step, very simple. We're just asked to change this button. It still says search by title, and now we're searching by topic. So now we did it. This one's done. Go back and mark these ones as done. So that's it. Hopefully there's some questions. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Good point. Yep. I'll do that now, as soon as this is over. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah. Right, right. Okay, so let's talk about map some more. Where is this? So maybe what I'll do is do some examples of map in here. Just play with it and see what happens. Is this text big enough down here? Okay, well, okay, maybe a little bigger. Let's just do some stuff. So I'm going to say, I've got an array of numbers here, right? 56 will be the last one. I'm going to call map on this array. I'm going to pass it a function, right? So just like any function, this one takes some input and then has a body between curly braces. So I'm going to call this num for number. So this function gets one number and returns something else. So I'm going to return, how about num plus 1, right? I'm doing this all in one line, but same thing, right? What do we get? The 1 became a 2, the 2 became a 3, 3 became a 4, 4 became 5, 56 became, right? Make sense? So what we did is we called map, and we passed map a function that transforms numbers into something else. And then we got an array of something else. And in this case, our transformation function takes a thing and adds 1 to it. So what if I wanted to multiply something by 2, right? Let's just simple. The only thing we change here is what we're doing to the num, right? We're going to return num times 2. Right. So how, yeah, so your question was, how does it know, you specify an argument like this, or in our other thing, add the keywords obj, and like how does it wire everything up so that it just seems like it somewhat magically just works, right? So it's kind of just like any other function, right? Where anytime you have a function that takes some input, like this one, right? This function takes a movie and then returns to you this like URL to get the poster path that we did last studio. So where did the movie come from? We don't, when we're here, we don't know where it came from. It's just whoever called it gave us the movie, right? So it's the same with map. With map, we don't, when we give it this function, we don't know where, per se, the number came from, but somewhere inside this, it's calling that function and giving it each thing. So like, I don't know, you know what we could do actually? Let's implement our own map. So then we'll see how it works from the inside. I'm going to say, I'm going to make a new. Well, this isn't quite going to work for various reasons, but let's just see how this works. So map is a function that takes another function, right? So when we call map, we give it this function, right? So let's just like imagine what that looks like. There's code somewhere in like JavaScript that looks like this. It's saying, when someone calls map, they're going to give me I'll call it TransformFunc. So they gave me a function, right? And I'm going to use it. So this is TransformFunc, right? And let's just say I have an array somewhere. So ultimately what we're going to do is like so what I'm like imagining what the inside of this map function looks like, right? And it's building up an array of new things. So that's like this. This is the new thing. And let's just pretend we have an old things around. This doesn't quite work because really it's like map is a method on this array object, but I don't want to get into that stuff. So I've got this, so I can, essentially I would say I'm going to do pseudocode here, right? For each thing in old things, new thing equals transform func old thing. And then new things plural, the array, dot push new thing singular that I just made up here. So here's the function that was passed in, like this one. And then someone else is the map inside of map. They're calling our function and giving us a single old thing. Does that make sense? Kind of? Yeah. Yeah. (104), where do I get which part? This. So there's nothing magical about this word. I just called it this. So, right, so we are specifying, maybe I'm going to rewrite this, might help. So the way I did it here is I passed this in as an anonymous function. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a function here called getID, which takes, so this is the, I'm not going to do anything different here. It's going to be the exact same thing. So it's just like any function. I get to decide what I'm going to call that thing internally for my own purposes. So it's like I'm saying I'm making a function that this might also be confusing because I stored it in a variable. I'm going to do it the most normal way we've seen so far. I'm going to make a function down here, right? Function get ID. And so just like any, I can call this whatever I want. I could say return x.id, but I'm expecting this to be one of those keyword objects, so I'm going to call it keyword object because it seems like a reasonable thing to call it. So whatever you, and then I'll go back and change. What was it? Here, so now instead of passing this whole anonymous function, I'm just going to pass get ID. Does that make sense? How it's a different way of doing the same thing here? So whenever I call map, I have to give it a function. The way I did it before is I defined the entire function between this parenthesis and this parenthesis, however you say that. The way I did it before was that the way I'm doing it now is I'm just going to use the name of this other function. But either way, I'm passing this function into map, and then map's going to use that function to transform each of the values. So now to get back to your question. So this was just to highlight how that function we gave is no different from any other function. So in any function, you specify some inputs here, and you get to decide what they are, what the names are, and the only thing that has to line up is inside the body of the function between curly braces. You have to call it by the same name that you called it above when you declared your arguments. That makes sense? Kind of. Renaming the response. Which response? So this we're not touching. The part I renamed was the function that gets passed into this map call here. Yeah. The data coming. So the data coming back is we're still using this whole thing. When we get something back, it executes this function. But this one little part where I wanted to turn the response.results into just the IDs, instead of making a function blah 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 here, I defined that function elsewhere and then I just referred to it here. Did you have anything, did you want to ask another question to clarify? Okay. Yeah. Yep. 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 Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yep, that's right. So if I wanted to change this to banana, that's fine. I would just have to change this to banana. So when I say banana, I'm referring to the first well, really when I say banana, I just mean the thing that was passed into this function. So as long as these two things line up, it works. More questions about map? I think it takes just a little bit of practice. Just keep practicing with this stuff. Map is super useful. Any more questions about other parts of the problem set or studio? Yeah. Like filter? Yeah, sure. Good. Good idea. Yeah, so in prep work I gave you some stuff relating to map and also filter, also reduce kind of, but map and filter are a little easier. Yeah, let's do this. So filter is a similar function to map in that you call it on an array, you pass it another function, and then you get out on the other end a new array. So let's practice that here. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So filter lets you, as the name would suggest, filter out some of these things. So I can get back a subset of the things that were originally in the array. So like, for example, what if we only wanted the even numbers in this array? So that would get rid of the 3, right? So the way you do that is you just pass it a function that takes a single number and returns a Boolean, true or false, indicating yes, this thing should be in the new array, or no, it should not. So your function gets to play a role of a filter by returning this like verdict, true or false, as to the question of whether the thing that was passed in should make it through to the new array. So we just specify a function here, call it num, return, I'll do something easier. Let's get all the numbers greater than 10. So it worked, we got 56, right? So do another one. And we're doing this something similar here to, I think it's still a little new for some of you guys, seeing use of Booleans in this way, where it's like sort of defined in line, like, where was it? When we disabled those buttons, we did something similar. Here, right? When I wanted to disable this watch list button, I said prop disabled, and then this should be, ultimately we want to pass either true or false. So instead of doing like some big if blah blah blah, true, else, false, we just insert the Boolean expression right here where we want it, and then this is going to evaluate to true or false based on whether this thing is true or not. So we're doing the same thing here. So I'm going to return, what this amounts to is, if the number ends up being bigger than 10, I'm saying return true. And if the number ends up being smaller than 10, I'm saying return false. So if we wanted the even numbers, how would we do this? Someone want to guess thing? What do I type here? What? Yeah, we can use the modulo, exactly. So what would that be? Yeah, exactly. Num modulo 2 equals, and actually we'll do triple equals 0. And there we go. We got the even numbers. And I forgot 1. 1 is not even. More questions about filter? Yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So the question was, the way we're using it, we're only taking this one argument, but in the documentation it's specified there's some more arguments that your function can take. It was elements, index, right? And array, more or less. So this is another example of like using optional arguments like this. So most of the time you probably just want the element, but there are probably some times when you're like, I don't know whether to return true or false. It kind of depends on what the index was. So in that case, you have the option of declaring that you want this second piece of input, and it'll pass it into you. And similarly with the array, like maybe your answer depends on something about the array itself, in which case you can take that as an argument. Although, like you said, in this case, we're calling it on the array itself as a method on the array itself, so we kind of already have a reference to the array if we wanted it, so we probably wouldn't need that. But there is an alternate way of calling. There's an alternate way of calling all these functions where you don't call it as a method on the object. You would say it's like this filter, and I forget what comes first. It's either the things and then the function, or the other way around. So this will do that. I'll go ahead and do this. 1, 2, 3, 4. I take a number and I return num is less than 3. Okay, I don't know. It didn't work. Oh, maybe I have to say array or something. I'll try one more thing. There's a way to do this. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Yeah. 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 Recommendations for a project. So I would say, I mean, something. So one thing you can do is like. So I would say use this as a general framework. Like make a front end, make a little front end that talks to an API somewhere where you can get some data, and then do something cool with that data. So a good way to get inspiration is just kind of browse what APIs are available and what kind of data is available, and then hopefully you'll think of like some cool ways to visualize that stuff. And you can think about like, so there's a lot of things we did not build out here that would be good things for a project. So like, we don't have a backend at all, right? So like one thing that's weird, this website we're making is sort of useless, right? Because the whole point is that I have a watch list of movies I want to remember, but every time I come back to the page, my watch list is empty. So it kind of defeats the purpose. So like in real life, if you're making this, you would make a backend where you're actually storing and remembering the user's data. So you would have like a login and then accounts and then a SQL database, similar to what you did in PSET 7, right? So yeah, when I say to use this as a framework, I don't want to pin you in too much, but that might help you if you're just like, I don't know, I could do anything and you don't have ideas. Like, start with this. You could even like extend this a lot. So I was going to give you guys a problem set where you like take this and then there's like a couple options for how to make it better. Like one of those things would be to add that backend. Another thing would be to like improve the browsing experience and make it a lot better or something. But Thursday we're gonna have another studio, and then I didn't want to send you home after the last day with an assignment, so I want you guys to have time to work on your projects. But one thing you could do is actually, if you want, you could just like take this and make it a lot better and add a bunch of features to it. Probably wouldn't be great if a lot of people did that, because then like Paul's gonna see the same project a million times. But yeah, if you want to do that, come talk to me, and then that way I can ensure that not too many people do that. Does that answer your question? So, yeah. No. Yeah, you can use this as a reference. If you have your own idea, go for it. Yeah. I don't think there's a guideline in terms of minimum hours. There's probably like a guideline in terms of minimum like skills that you demonstrate in your project or something. Yeah. And I could have sworn, I'm pretty sure Sally and Paul are going to make a write-up, and then we're going to post it, and then we're going to tell you about it. So I think that'll happen soon. But yeah, as a general formula, so like if you have a project that talks to an API, displays it, displays the data in a nice user interface, it uses responsive design, uses like jQuery and Bootstrap are helpful, uses like maybe some other libraries. That's like pretty good. If you throw a backend on that, then that's like very good. Maybe I'll put together a guideline on Thursday for like possible ways you could branch out, like do a project that does everything here and like incorporates this new set of skills or this new set of skills or something like that. More questions? Cool. See you guys.